Welcome back to All Things Soggy Bunz,
Oh,
the podcast that takes a deep dive into all things delicious.
yeah.
Today, we're diving into the world of pellet smokers.
Oh, fun.
Think of it like a deep dive into deliciousness,
Okay.
smoky flavors, and maybe a little bit of barbecue science.
Uh-huh.
I'm so excited to explore this with you because, let's be honest, who doesn't love the idea of perfectly smoked meats without the constant hassle of charcoal?
It's going to be a fun one. Pellet smokers have really changed the game for home cooks who want that authentic smoky flavor without the fuss.
Yeah. Okay, so for our listeners who might be new to this, let's start with the basics. What exactly is a pellet smoker?
A pellet smoker is basically a wood-burning cooker that uses food-grade compressed wood pellets as fuel. What's cool about them is they're incredibly versatile. You're not just limited to smoking. You can grill, bake, roast. Almost anything you can do in an oven, you can do in a pellet smoker with an added layer of smoky goodness.
It's like an outdoor oven with a built-in smoke flavor. Now, I've always been a bit intimidated by smokers in general. They just seem so complicated. Are pellet smokers any different?
That's a common misconception. One of the things that make pellet smokers so popular is their ease of use. They're designed to be user-friendly, even for beginners. It's almost like setting it and forgetting it, especially compared to charcoal smokers where you're constantly monitoring the temperature and adding fuel.
So you're saying it's more like setting the cruise control on your barbecue.
Exactly.
That sounds a lot less stressful.
Exactly. And that precise temperature control is really what sets pellet smokers apart. You see, they have a system that automatically feeds pellets into a burn pot, and fans circulate air to maintain a consistent temperature throughout the cooking chamber. It's almost like having an outdoor oven with built-in smoke flavor. So you get that low and slow smoky perfection without having to babysit the fire all day long.
Okay, that's fascinating. Can we break down how that system works? I'm picturing a lot of moving parts here.
It's actually pretty simple. Imagine this. You have a hopper full of those wood pellets, kind of like a giant container. Then there's an auger, which is basically a screw-like mechanism that feeds the pellets from the hopper down into the burn pot at the bottom of the chamber.
So it's like a self-feeding fire.
It is.
That's pretty cool.
And then you've got fans that circulate air throughout the cooking chamber, distributing the heat and smoke evenly. The temperature is regulated by controlling how much air gets into the burn pot. More air means a hotter fire, and less air means a lower and slower burn.
So it's kind of like adjusting a vent to control the heat.
That's a great analogy. Now, you might be wondering, how do I actually control the temperature? Well, most pellet smokers come with digital controllers that let you set the exact temperature you want, just like an oven. That's where that set it and forget it magic really comes in. You set the temperature, the smoker does the rest, and you can focus on other things while your food cooks to perfection. You can even use a meat probe to monitor the internal temperature of your food for ultimate precision.
Okay, you're making this sound incredibly tempting, especially for someone like me who loves the flavor of smoked food, but doesn't always have the time or patience to mess around with charcoal. This really does sound like a game changer.
It definitely is. And what's even better is that you're not limited to traditional barbecue fare. You can smoke everything from brisket and ribs to fish, vegetables, even cheese. The possibilities are endless. You can even bake in them.
Okay, so now I'm really intrigued. I'm already picturing smoky pizzas and maybe even a smoked cheesecake. I know I can get more info on recipes and even reviews at soggybunz.com.
Yes.
That's buns with a Z's. But what are some of your favorite things to make on a pellet smoker?
Well, I'm a sucker for a classic smoked brisket, but one of my favorite things to do is actually smoke vegetables. It really brings out their natural sweetness and adds a whole new dimension of flavor.
Speaking of flavor, I know different types of wood pellets produce different flavor profiles. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Absolutely. This is where things get really interesting. Different hardwoods impart unique flavors to your food. You have your bolder woods like hickory, which give you that strong bacon-like smokiness. Then you have your more mellow woods like applewood, which are milder and slightly sweet, perfect for poultry or pork. And for a more delicate flavor, alder is a great choice, especially for fish.
It's like having a whole spice rack of smoky flavors at your fingertips.
Exactly. And you can even blend different wood pellets to create your own custom flavor profiles. It's all about experimenting and finding what you like best. There are no hard and fast rules, which is part of the fun.
I love that. So it's not just about the smoker itself. It's about understanding the nuances of wood and flavor and really becoming a smoke artist.
You got it. And
Yeah.
that's where the real magic of pellet smoking lies.
Now, I know Masterclass has some resources on using pellet smokers. What are some of their key tips that stand out to you?
Masterclass highlights some really important points, and one of them is the importance of keeping your smoker clean. I know cleaning isn't the most glamorous part of cooking, but it's crucial for maintaining the efficiency and longevity of your pellet smoker.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
A clean smoker is a happy smoker.
exactly. You want to make sure those pellets are burning efficiently and that you're not getting any unwanted flavors from built-up residue. And speaking of unwanted flavors, another thing Masterclass emphasizes is the importance of choosing the right wood for the right food.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Uh-huh.
So we've got clean smokers and the right wood. What else does Masterclass recommend?
One of the biggest takeaways from Masterclass, and something I can't stress enough, is the importance of using a high-quality digital thermometer. Even if your smoker comes with a built-in thermometer, having a separate, reliable thermometer is absolutely essential. Why? Because it ensures you're cooking your food to the perfect internal temperature every time, which is key for both safety and flavor.
Temperature control is key, especially when you're dealing with different cuts of meat and cooking times. Now, speaking of meat and cooking times, I have a confession to make.
A confession! What did you do, burn something?
Worse. I tried smoking a pork shoulder once, and I went all in on the mesquite wood, thinking I wanted that super smoky flavor. Let's just say it was a bit overpowering. Almost inedible.
Ah, yes, mesquite. It can be a bit of a bully, especially for delicate meats like pork or chicken. It's best reserved for beef or game meats that can stand up to that intense smoky flavor.
Live and learn, right? Which is why we're so lucky to have you here to guide us.
Yeah.
Now, Masterclass also mentions considering cooking space when choosing a pellet smoker. What do they mean by that?
It's all about planning ahead and thinking about your needs. Pellet smokers come in a wide range of sizes, from compact models perfect for small patios to behemoths that can feed a crowd.
So it's kind of like choosing between a sports car and a minivan.
Exactly.
Depends on how many people you need to haul around.
Yeah. Exactly. If you're mostly cooking for yourself or a small family, a smaller model might be perfect. But if you're planning on hosting big barbecue parties, you'll definitely want to consider a larger smoker with more cooking space.
That makes sense. You don't want to run out of room when you've got a hungry crowd waiting for their smoked ribs.
And speaking of ribs, Masterclass also talks about the importance of understanding the different cooking zones in your smoker.
Cooking zones. So it's not just one big, evenly heated space.
Not necessarily. Depending on the design of the smoker, you might have areas that are hotter or cooler than others. This is important to keep in mind when arranging your food, especially if you're cooking different types of food at the same time. You might want to put things that require a higher temperature closer to the heat source and things that need to cook slower and lower further away.
Okay, so it's like strategic placement for optimal smoke and heat distribution.
Exactly. And that's where a good digital thermometer really comes in handy. You can use it to check the temperature in different areas of the smoker and make sure everything is cooking evenly.
So it's about being aware of those subtle variations in temperature and adjusting accordingly. It's all starting to make sense.
And here's another tip from Masterclass that I find particularly helpful. Don't be afraid to experiment with different wood pellet blends.
We talked about that a bit earlier, but can you give some specific examples?
Sure. For example, if you're smoking a pork shoulder, you could use a blend of hickory and applewood for a balanced, smoky, sweet flavor. Or if you're smoking salmon, you could try a blend of alder and maple for a more delicate, slightly sweet smoke.
It sounds like there's a whole world of flavor combinations to explore. I'm already feeling inspired to get creative with my pellet smoker.
That's the spirit. And remember, there are no right or wrong answers when it comes to wood pellet blends. It's all about experimenting and finding what you like best.
Now, you mentioned something earlier called a sear box. Can you explain what that is and why someone might want one?
A sear box is basically a high heat attachment for your pellet smoker. It allows you to achieve those beautiful sear marks and crispy crusts that you would typically get from a traditional grill.
So you can get that smoky flavor from the pellet smoker and then finish it off with a sear for that extra layer of texture and flavor.
Exactly. It's all about versatility. Pellet smokers are already incredibly versatile, but a sear box takes it to a whole new level.
That sounds amazing. I'm
Yeah.
picturing perfectly seared steaks with that smoky depth of flavor.
Yeah.
So much better than just using a cast iron pan on the stovetop.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Some sear boxes use infrared burners, which provide intense focused heat for incredible crusts. Others use traditional gas burners, which offer more even heating for larger items.
Wow, so there's even variation within sear boxes themselves. Like there's always more to learn and explore in the world of pellet smoking.
There is, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Speaking of exciting, I think it's time for us to dive into some more advanced techniques. I know our listeners are eager to take their pellet smoking skills to the next level, but before we do, let's take a quick break. If you're feeling inspired to explore the world of pellet smokers, Be sure to visit soggybunz.com. That's buns with a Z. You'll find a wealth of resources there, from detailed reviews of different pellet smoker models to tips and tricks for mastering your smoking techniques. And don't forget to check out our amazing recipes. Okay, now that we've had a moment to refuel our brains, let's get back to our deep dive into the world of pellet smoking.
Sounds good to me. Where should we start?
Well, I know a lot of people struggle with a phenomenon called the stall. Have you ever experienced this, and what's the best way to manage it?
The stall is a real thing, and it can be frustrating if you don't know what's going on. Basically, it's when the internal temperature of your meat plateaus during the smoking process.
So you're patiently waiting for that temperature to climb, and then it just stops.
Exactly. It happens because as the meat cooks, moisture evaporates from the surface, creating a cooling effect. This can make it seem like the cooking process has stalled, but rest assured it's still cooking.
Okay, so it's not actually stalled, it's just taking a little break.
Exactly. And there are a few things you can do to help speed things along. One popular method is called the Texas crutch, where you wrap the meat in foil to trap moisture and heat, helping it to cook through more efficiently.
I have heard of that.
Yeah.
So it's like giving your meat a little sauna to help it reach the finish line.
That's a great way to put it.
Now, I know a lot of people, myself included, are a bit intimidated by the idea of smoking large cuts of meat like brisket or pork shoulder. Any tips for beginners who want to try their hand at those more challenging cuts?
My advice would be to start with a smaller cut of meat, like a pork loin or a rack of ribs. This will give you a chance to get familiar with your pellet smoker and the smoking process without feeling overwhelmed. Once you feel confident with the basics, you can gradually work your way up to those larger, more challenging cuts.
So it's kind of like learning to drive a car.
Yeah.
You wouldn't start out on a racetrack, you'd practice in a parking lot first.
Exactly. And remember, there are tons of resources available online and in cookbooks to help you along the way. And don't be afraid to reach out to other pellet smoker enthusiasts for advice and tips. There's a whole community out there who are passionate about sharing their knowledge and helping others succeed.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's not just about the food, it's about the community and the shared passion for cooking and flavor.
absolutely.
Now, speaking of community, we'd love to hear from our listeners. If you have any questions about pellet smokers, or if you want to share your own experiences and tips, be sure to reach out to us on social media. We're always happy to connect with fellow barbecue enthusiasts and learn from each other.
And don't forget, if you're looking for more in-depth information reviews and delicious recipes, be sure to visit soggybunz.com. That's Stevie Buns with a Z. It's your one-stop shop for all things pellet smoking.
That's right. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to get your take on something that's always fascinated me. What are some of the biggest mistakes people make when using a pellet smoker, and how can they avoid them?
That's a great question. I think one of the most common mistakes is not letting the smoker preheat properly.
So it's kind of like baking a cake in a cold oven. It's not going to turn out right.
Exactly. It's crucial to let the smoker come up to temperature before you start cooking. This ensures that the pellets are burning efficiently and that the cooking chamber is evenly heated.
Okay, preheat the smoker. What else should we avoid doing?
Another common mistake is opening the lid too often. Every time you open the lid, you're letting out heat and smoke, which can disrupt the cooking process and prolong the cooking time.
So it's like peeking at a cake in the oven. Just let it do its thing.
Exactly. Trust the process and resist the urge to constantly check on your food.
Okay, preheat the smoker. Don't open the lid too often. Got it. Any other words of wisdom?
One more thing, don't overcrowd the cooking chamber. Give your food plenty of space to breathe and allow the smoke to circulate properly.
So it's all about giving your food room to spa.
Yeah.
Good air circulation for optimal smoky flavor.
Exactly. And remember, when it comes to pellet smoking, patience is key. Don't rush the process, enjoy the journey, and savor the delicious results.
Beautifully said.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground today, from the basics of how a pellet smoker works to some more advanced techniques and tips.
Yeah.
But before we let our listeners go, I want to leave them with a little challenge. Imagine you've just gotten your hands on a brand new, shiny pellet smoker. It's sitting on your patio, just begging to be used. What's the first thing you're going to cook on it, and what kind of wood are you going to use to create that perfect smoky flavor?
Ooh, that's a tough one. There are so many delicious possibilities. I think I'd have to go with a classic brisket. Smoked low and slow with a blend of hickory and oak for that deep, rich flavor. What about you?
You know me, I can't resist a good pork shoulder. But this time I'm going to skip the mesquite and go for something a little sweeter, like cherry or applewood. Maybe even throw in a little pecan for good measure.
Sounds delicious. I can practically smell it now.
Me too. And I bet our listeners are starting to feel those hunger pangs as well. We've taken them on quite the smoky journey today, haven't we?
We have. From the basic mechanics of a pellet smoker to tips for choosing the right wood, managing the stall, and even exploring the world of sear boxes.
And we can't forget the importance of keeping that smoker clean using a reliable digital thermometer and giving our food plenty of space to breathe in that smoky sauna.
Absolutely. Those are key takeaways for anyone looking to master the art of pellet smoking.
It's been such a pleasure exploring this topic with you. Your insights and expertise have been invaluable.
Thanks for having me. It's always a treat to talk about all things barbecue.
Now, before we sign off, I want to remind our listeners that this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the world of pellet smoking. There's so much more to learn, explore, and experiment with.
And the best way to do that is to fire up those smokers and get cooking. Don't be afraid to try new things, experiment with different wood blends, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Beautifully said. And remember, if you're looking for more inspiration guidance or just a community of passionate barbecue enthusiasts to connect with, be sure to visit soggybunz.com. That's buns with a Z.
We've got everything you need to become a pellet smoking pro in no time. From in-depth articles and reviews to mouth-watering recipes and a forum where you can connect with other pellet smokers.
So what are you waiting for? Head over to soggybunz.com and fire up those smokers and get ready for a world of smoky, delicious possibilities.
Happy smoking!
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of pellet smokers. We hope you learned a thing or two, got inspired to try something new, and maybe even worked up an appetite along the way. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this smoky adventure. Thanks for listening to All Things Soggy Bunz.